Man, it is hard to believe that this show is finally over. I am gonna truly miss the Apothecary Diaries. It's been such a wonderful and beautiful show, but luckily we were given some good news about it. But let's talk more about that after we discuss the last few episodes that the show had, starting with episode 22 and the mission of creating blue roses. Now, the way this episode opens up is that Lakan comes up to Jinshi and presents him with the challenge of obtaining blue roses for the garden party. And of course, Jinshi, racking his brain on how to accomplish this goal, approaches who? None other than our girl Maomao. And of course, luckily for him, she has some experience with roses. But the problem is, roses aren't in season, for one. And two, blue roses aren't actually a thing that occur in nature. So, how are they going to go about accomplishing this goal? Well, Mao Mao comes up with the trick to use the steam room that they previously built for Lady Aduo when she was sick. And the idea behind the steam room is to use it to trick the roses into thinking it's time to bloom by controlling the heat. But this takes some precision, and because of this, our girl Mao Mao ends up quite exhausted as things go on. As you can see in some of these clips, like here, she's looking kind of worn out. Right here, specifically. Man, those bags under her eye. Our girl is tired, and who can blame her? She's been staying up nights on end, controlling the temperature of these flowers, and making sure everything is just right to make the roses go wild, or trick them into blooming, as you could say. But here's the thing. Some of the other court ladies start becoming a little interested in what's going on, but this is a bit irritating for Mao Mao. So, she ends up bringing manicures into the picture, and everybody gets distracted with painting their nails and making their fingers all pretty, which gets her onlookers off her back, which is exactly what she wanted. But we find out that there's a little bit more to why she did this, and it's because of how it affects Lakan. Apparently, these brighter colors kind of mess with his eyes because he keeps catching it out of the corner of his eye, and it actually causes his eyes to become somewhat irritated or a little bit in pain. So I guess it was also a way of her throwing a little jab at Lakan and then being like, heh. But aside from that, we also learn throughout this episode that Mao Mao is finally planning to confront Lakan, which we get to at the end of the episode, where she appears in front of him, thus setting up what we get to in episode 23. And as you can see here, Mao Mao in episode 23 ends up challenging our boy Lakan to a game of Chinese chess. But this is no ordinary game. This game is something that Mao Mao turns deadly by adding a condition that the losers of the game have to drink one of these several cups of liquid, with a few of them having a special medicine mixed in that if you consume 3 doses of it in a short amount of time, it actually turns into a deadly poison. And that's how Mao Mao raises the stakes of this game. But why would she do this? And thus the game begins. And, of course, since Mao Mao is nowhere near as skilled at Chinese chess as Lakan, she ends up losing twice in a row. And whether or not her cups are filled with poison is unknown. And then we get to game 3. But what happens? Lakan allows her to win. Why? Because, as we have been seeing throughout the series, he really cares about Mao Mao, and he even states during this episode that he cannot allow his daughter to consume poison and die on his watch. So, of course, he lets her win, thus making it so he has to drink one of these cups. And he even asks Maomao, is there a way to tell which of these cups has poison in it? And she's like, yeah, it tastes really bad. Thus, Lakan drinks one of these cups of liquid, and soon after, what happens to him? He falls right over on the ground. Jinshi proceeds to freak out, going like, what did you just do? But we find out that he is just out cold because what Maomao really had mixed into these cups was a very strong alcohol or spirits. And since Lakan doesn't drink much, he ends up passing out due to alcohol overdose. And another condition that was given during the game is that if you're unable to continue playing for any reason, you automatically lose. But there was one more condition if one or the other lost. If Maomao had actually lost, the condition was she would go live with Lakan. And if Lakan lost, the Maomao's condition was he would buy out a courtesan from the vertebrae house. And due to him passing out cold from the alcohol, he has now lost and now must purchase a courtesan. But before we get into that, there is something I forgot to bring up that we are introduced to towards the end of the previous episode, and that's Lakan's condition, known as prosopagnosia, or face blindness. We find out that he is unable to discern people's faces for the most part, and views them, at least regular people, as ghost stones. Their faces are either white stones or black stones. White stones for women, black stones for men. But people of like higher status, he views them as chess pieces, and depending on how high ranking they are, depends on what piece represents them as the face he can see. However, we are shown, at least in the previous episode, that there is at least one face currently that he can discern, and that's Maomao's, which is quite interesting, and kind of shows a bit more of his connection and how he feels about Maomao as his daughter, that he truly cares, and that she's one of the only people that we've been shown up to this point that he can actually see what their face looks like and recognize them is quite awesome, and a really good thing to do with his character, in my opinion. But jumping back over here, what was going on? Yeah, I think we actually have a shot of his, an example of his condition. Oh, there we go. Yeah, right there. As you can see, those are some of the faces he can see as chess pieces there, which means these are people of like higher standing. And then you got some people who are just like more standard servants or something, whose faces are just black ghost stones. Alright, now let's get into what the real meat of episode 23 after Lakan's defeat by Maomao and her little trick of spiking the drinks with strong alcohol. And that is, we get to dive a bit into Lakan's past, which is really interesting. We dive more into his condition, and that there was somebody close to him that actually helped him learn how to handle his face blindness condition, and that's how he kind of trained himself. And as he mastered this way of discerning people, the person who helped him was a chariot, which I guess is a very important piece in Chinese chess, because to Lakan, seeing this man as the chariot reaffirmed to him how great a man he was. And we also get the introduction of how Lakan and, I'm probably going to completely mess up her name, but Fengxian or Fuzhang, Maomao's mother. I'll get that name down eventually. I'll have to look up how to properly pronounce it. But Maomao's mother. We find out how Lakan met Maomao's mother. He ended up finding out about her from some of his friends, that there was this courtesan who was really good at Go. And so Going to the courtesan house with some of his buddies, he ends up challenging Maomao's mother to a match and ends up being beaten for the first time in a really long time. She is the first person to beat him. But here's another interesting thing that pops up during this match, and that is Lakan is able to see Maomao's mother's face. So now we have two people that he's able to discern faces of. Maomao's mother and Maomao herself. This just kind of reaffirms the connection he has to these two women, which is really cool in my opinion. I think it's really cool that how they go about showing that he can see Maomao's mom's face as well as being able to see Maomao. It's not until a bit later, the final episode, that we find out that there is one more person who he can discern the face of. But we'll get to that when we get to the last episode. Let's talk a bit more about this. After this, we kind of see the development of the relationship between Lakan and Maomao's mother, on how he continues to come back and play games with her, and eventually we find out that they're pretty much in love with one another, and Maomao's mother ends up challenging him to a game with the condition of whoever wins gets to have the other do whatever they want for them. And Maomao's mother ends up wanting to take Lakan to bed, which is how she ends up being pregnant. Because her whole plan was to have Maomao, which would greatly lower her price because of how popular she is at the Verdigris house, so that Lakan could buy her out and then they could be a family. Because she wanted to be with him, and he also wanted to be with her. But of course, neither one of them are really good at expressing how they truly feel, which we find out a bit later as well. But all in all, it's just really cool how they went about this. We also find out something interesting about Maomao's adopted father, and that is that he is Lakan's uncle. And it is because he was ousted from his position as a doctor that Lakan ended up having to be sent away, because he had promised Maomao's mother that he would return to see her in roughly another 3 months or so. But sadly, because of what happened with Maomao's adoptive father, Lakan's uncle, he ends up being sent away for actually a full 3 years, which kind of ends up leading to Maomao's mother being in the condition that we see her in present time, because of her becoming pregnant and all that, and her value lowering and becoming less desired as a courtesan. She had to sell out her body, which is what led her to contracting the syphilis and leading to the degrade of her body and mind from thereon, and all the terrible things that happened with her, like cutting off her own finger and Maomao's little finger that she often looks at, or at least the tip of it, and sending like a bloodied letter to Lakan and like cursing him. And she had been sending him letters for these past 3 years, trying to tell him about what was going on. By the time he made it back, he was no longer permitted to even see her or come in contact with her, and his own daughter was kept from him. And even when he tried to interact with Maomao, which we find out in the next episode, because she didn't really know who he was, and trying to insist that he was her father, kind of pushed Maomao away because he was a bit too persistent for her to try to get to know him, so he kind of freaked her out. But that's jumping a bit into episode 24, which I think we can at this point, into the grand finale. We get some really nice payoffs, including what I was just talking about, where Lakan was trying to interact with Maomao, but because she didn't know about him, she kind of fell away from him, which she explains more during this episode. Let's get to how episode 24 starts off, outside of this, and that is Lakan choosing which courtesan to buy out due to the conditions of his match with Maomao. Now, initially, he almost ends up choosing Mei Mei here, who we see over here. But because of the flower that Maomao had given him, the wilted rose that maintains its shape and beauty despite being withered, was actually a message to Lakan, which he figures out after Mei opens up these doors here, and he starts hearing a song that he heard way back in the day when he was with Maomao's mother, that she would sing. And after hearing this faint singing, Lakan takes off towards it and eventually comes across Maomao's mother. And he goes, "This is the woman I choose. I will buy this woman out. However much you want, I will pay it. Because it is the woman he loved so dearly, the woman who gave birth to his daughter, and the one he has been missing for all this time." And he finally gets reunited with her, which is actually quite a beautiful scene, because he still sees her as the beauty she was back then. And then our boy starts shedding tears of joy to be reunited with his love. Such a sweet moment. So beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. Which is why I love this show so much. Because of moments like these. They're just so well done. Such great things done with these characters. And why the Apothecary Diaries is put in the running, if not my anime of the year. And that's saying quite a lot with all the competition that's out there. With things like Free Ren, Delicious, and Dungeon being out there as good competition, but for me, Apothecary Diaries was number one. And which is why I hope other people end up watching it as well. Now let's talk about how Maomao truly feels about Lakan. At least according to what she says during a conversation she's having here with Jinchi, she doesn't truly hate Lakan. How much of that is true, I'm not entirely sure, because she has expressed some scary faces in reference to Lakan. But she breaks down that she doesn't truly hate him. She does dislike him, but it's not outright rage or purest of hate for him. Because she understands at a logical standpoint that her mother wouldn't have had her if she didn't want to, and that she wouldn't have slept with Lakan if she didn't want to. It's just that the in-between stuff that happened, she doesn't really know about. Like what happened to Lakan, why he wasn't able to come back to her mother and all that. Like, because she doesn't have that context, she doesn't have the full story. So what she does have is what she presents to us, and that she understands that everything happened because they wanted it to, especially her mom, but because of the circumstances of Lakan, things just went south, unfortunately, which is rather fascinating. So I do hope that at least Maomao and Lakan can, at least become on better terms with one another. They don't necessarily have to be straight up father-daughter, but if they could become at least like on good terms where she doesn't completely dislike him, or like even if she can get some kind of respect for him, or if they could just become like friends to a degree, that would be quite good for both Lakan and Maomao, and would make Lakan very happy because he is the doting father type, and he shows it on occasion, and he even expresses it when he's thinking about Jinchi, his hand on Maomao's shoulder like 3 times during their game, and he's like, "I'm gonna get that man for putting his hand on my daughter 3 times during our match. How dare he? How shall I seek my revenge?" I'm like, chill out, bro. But he is quite the doting dad. He's like, "You dare touch my little girl, I'll beat your ass, boy." But since he's more of the schemy type, he'll try to get at him for a more roundabout way, which is pretty humorous, in my opinion. But that's not all. We also get another very beautiful sequence at the finale of this episode, and that is Maomao's send-off dance that she does for the courtesan who gets bought out. And apparently this is a tradition for when courtesans get bought out in the red light district, you have a send-off dance. And you never know who that courtesan actually is. But Maomao does, thanks to a letter she received from Mei explaining who bought out who and like the whole breakdown. So she knows it was her mom who was bought out. But she does express that she would have been happy if it was Mei because she knows her mom doesn't have long. She would have been happy to see Mei get bought out because she considers Mei one of the kindest people she knows and would have been very happy to have been sending her off instead. But even so, she does the send-off dance knowing that it's for her mom, which kind of makes it even sweeter because even though it's not the woman she was hoping would get bought out, it's still someone, but it's still the one she had encouraged to be bought out, which is why she had presented Lakan with the wilted rose as a hint that her mom was still there. So in a sense, she still got one of the people out that she wanted to, but she's also sad. She knows her mom's time isn't very long because of her sickness, and she won't be around much longer. But despite that, Lakan is planning to spend as much time as he can with her before she inevitably passes from her sickness. He even takes a whole 10 days vacation off after purchasing her just so that he can spend time with Maomao's mother, which is quite precious and beautiful and just a good way to kind of end that off. And then at the very end of this episode, after Maomao's beautiful dance sending off her mom, we get a nice little sequence, a nice fun little sequence between Maomao and Jinshi, and even a bit of a troll here that Maomao does for her boy. She gives him like this look, this like gazing look, and she's like, "There's something important I have to tell you." And Jinshi's like, "What is it? Spit it out." She's like, "What about that oxbazer drug? Do you have that?" Making it seem like she was about to kiss our boy, but ending up saying, "I want that oxbazer drug." Oh my gosh. It was so funny because after, because she has like this cat, she gets like this cat-esque thing, which is quite fitting. And then, of course, her wound on her leg opened back up from dancing, so Jinshi has to carry her off. And then we end with Maomao getting the drug she wanted, and Jinshi calling her for a new mission, a new case to crack, and thus ending off this lovely series. Man, what a journey this series was. Lucky for us, we got the announcement of a season 2 at the very end here. Season 2 production confirmed, and we even got the confirmation that it is set to come out in 2025. So Maomao will return next year, and I am for it. But what are we to do now that the Apothecary Diaries is over? Does that mean we won't have any more videos about it? Not a chance. I have quite a few more videos planned out for the Apothecary Diaries, talking about the characters, so on. Probably, maybe not a complete overview of the whole series itself, because I kind of did that already during this. But there will be more Apothecary Diaries content, as well as some other things I'm planning. Plus, I also bought the first 10 volumes, thanks to a special deal on Bookwalker. Not sponsored. I ain't big enough for that shit. But I am excited because I'm gonna be looking into the light novels and, of course, doing some videos about some of the stuff that was left out from the anime that is in the light novel. So look forward to those. Probably be a little bit because I'm still kind of reading through the first volume as of right now. But I should have a video up in a couple of weeks going over a few differences from the first few episodes of the series. And we will probably have a few of those, as many as we can, leading up to when it comes back next year. And of course, since that'll be pretty spoilery, you don't have to watch them if you want to be surprised when the anime returns next year. I would love to hear down in the chat all of your guys' thoughts on this series and how you felt about it, your favorite characters and whatnot. And if you're gonna post anything spoilery in the comments, make sure to, notify people that your comment is filled with spoilers, just in case they want to be surprised when the anime returns next year. We gotta be considerate of others, even if we want to just completely gush about things in the light novels. You gotta make sure you're considerate of others who don't want to know. In any case, with that all said, Mr. Howry, out.